He's back, people. I was just about to go absolutely hog wild on Benny Thomas, but I guess I'll save that for when Barnes gets in here. At least we know the Pravda hasn't come to get him. All right. Although, why is he bleeding on the head? I'm joking. Robert, let's see if this is working better. Everything okay?
How is it? Check.
Oh, so much better. Okay, good. People were thinking that you got hacked and then got whisked off to a secret police station, Robert. Okay.
It always takes forever for this computer to reload.
Well, now people are questioning how old your bloody computer is. Robert, what do you have behind you? Because I want to say Pappy's only because I can't see it, and I assume that's what it might be.
Oh, no, it's a bunch of gifts that different people gave. So different kinds of whiskeys, rums, bourbons, books. That's a book on the police power of the state and, the cases that used to remind the government of the limitations on the police power of the state. So all of that.
Okay, now what we're going to do, we've been on for 50 minutes. We're moving straight to Rumble right now. So everybody, let me give everybody the link to the Rumbles and the link to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And we're going to talk about, so Robert, actually, before we do that, tell everybody as I do that, what's on the menu for tonight, because we got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, we got a lot of cases, got some crazy cases. I mean, the most, the one that won the no favorites was number one, but right behind it was all the Trump-related cases, including the immunity argument, which will be heard at the Supreme Court this week. Then all the craziness with the Trump trial, of course, and good logic trying to get through the challenge to the unconstitutional gag order that the New York courts are doing everything possible to hide from handling. Then we have Brooke Jackson. We filed our opposition to the government's attempts to intervene and dismiss in that case. We'll go through that. Filed a Supreme Court petition this week as well on behalf of Children's Health Defense against the Food and Drug Administration, asking the question, if they can't sue the FDA, then who can, challenging the standing doctrine in general. We got crazy cases out of Pennsylvania, not only an update on the Amos Miller case, we got people who are today imprisoned in jail in Pennsylvania, though they have never been charged with a crime, and though they have never been made parties to a case. And yet courts, at some level, complicit with a rogue state agency, has ordered their imprisonment with no set determination, according to the order of commitment. By a court that doesn't even have criminal jurisdiction that signed off on this, a court that's going to handle the appeal in the Amos Miller case. So you got to wonder what's going on there. We have another case where a woman has been charged with a crime for recording her own court proceedings. So we got that going on. We have the Supreme Court heard January 6th hearings, of course, this past week that you covered. Also, we have the Supreme Court issuing decisions in a confusing interpretation of a case that involves takings clause and Texas. The homeless rights issue is going to go before the Supreme Court either tomorrow or on Tuesday. This is the last oral argument session for the Supreme Court. Now we'll just be waiting for decisions after this week of oral arguments. They also made a good decision on Title VII. We got Biden issuing new policies on Title IX. It appears to apply to things that, by its plain language, is not supposed to apply to. And a few other interesting, fun cases that might percolate up.
Robert, there's a warrant in that Pennsylvania case. Is that a public document?
Kind of. I mean, so it's been given to other people, namely sheriffs. And it was sent by the protho notary of the court. I mean, all of it's just completely wacky.
Okay, we'll get to it. It's just that I didn't look. It has an address in it, and I didn't want to bring it up, or I don't know if it's public, but whatever. We'll get there with the Pennsylvania case. People, I talked about it last week after you did the bourbon with Barnes. It's effing nuts. But we're going to get there. We are now going to end on YouTube, everybody. Sorry for the glitch and the intro, but now you know a little bit about the Canadian stuff and how Canada's going to turn into Venezuela in 5 to 10 years if Justin Trudeau manages to stay in power. Ending on YouTube. Come on over to Rumble or Locals. The link is pinned for Rumble, and I shared the Locals link. And that's it. We're going to start with Trump because it's just, Robert, I'm saying it out loud now. They are trying to facilitate someone killing him. They're trying to do it. We're going to get there. Ending on YouTube. Okay, Robert. So we'll start with the jury impanelment in the New York Alvin Bragg case. First things first, I'm trying to describe it. The charges against Trump in the ordinary circumstances would only be a misdemeanor. The only way they managed to trump them up to a felony case was to argue that it was violating federal election law as relates to election interference. That's accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. And people are saying, well, this payment was made before he was a president, allegedly by Michael Cohen, and was reimbursed when he was a president. And so then that is the answer to the argument that although the action was done in his quest for the presidency, the impugned acts were carried out when he was a president, and therefore should fall within a broad ambit of immunity interpretation.
Yeah, there's no question that every single allegation in the New York case that alleges a criminal act by President Trump is that he did that while he was president.
Okay. And okay, that's fine. It's I just don't understand how they've managed to exaggerate this up to a felony case. I understand it because I say the words and I understand the mechanism, but I don't understand how they are alleging a violation of federal law at the state level to take a state misdemeanor and convert it into a felony. I guess appeals will have to deal with that because they're not allowed, or they're not going to argue that before the jury. Jury impanelment. You heard the story of the man who set himself on fire in front of the court?
Yeah.
I was just waiting for people, whether or not people say he was a hero or mentally ill depends on what cause he was claiming to support when he did it. And people were not calling this guy a hero, whereas they were calling the other guy who did it for, free Palestine a hero. They impaneled the jury. Have you ever seen anything like this? The woman who gets out and immediately starts doing the rounds of interviews, and basically, did she admit that she lied under oath or lied in court documents on the jury questionnaire form? She had to have.
That's a reasonable inference.
Is it a lie under penalty of perjury, what they fill out on those jury questionnaire forms?
Often, yes.
Okay. All right. What do you know the details of the panel that they've impaneled, or the 12 plus the alternates?
I do not.
Is there a snowball's chance in hell that he gets a fair trial in New York?
I can't imagine that he would. And this judge, the way he calendared the trial to overlap with the Jewish holiday, the way he structured the jury selection part of the process, the kind of people he considered acceptable. You had a jury pool that overwhelmingly wants to see Trump convicted, that have a preconceived understanding of him and of the case. As such, that it was impossible to get an impartial jury out of New York unless you went through extraordinary, rigorous jury screening. And he clearly did not. So given that, I don't see any chance that Trump has to get an impartial jury. The only question is, can even a corrupt jury see through the insanity of this case? Potentially. I mean, the corrupt jury that presided over the rape case said that Trump was not guilty of rape, even though the judge kept saying otherwise afterwards. Give you an idea of that judge's bias. So I don't, it's a show trial. And what's interesting is a lot of people on the left, the legal left in the Democratic Party, really thought if they did a show trial that people would think it's not a show trial, that they would think, oh, this is a sincere trial, honest, ordinary, everyday Americans, as Adam Schiff described the jury pool. I wonder if Adam Schiff would feel that way if we decided to try him, say, in rural Texas or small town Alabama. It's a crock. You could tell a lot of them were agitated that they thought, well, if Trump was gagged, then people will falsely believe this is a legitimate trial. It was like what they did in the Alex Jones cases. They thought that that people would buy into these verdicts being legitimate, independent, honest, objective verdicts. They're not. They're a crock. Everybody knows what they are. When you have Stephen A. Smith of the world, ESPN guys saying this is a crock, you've lost the script. You've lost the narrative. They assumed people wouldn't see through this obvious insanity. It's like trying Martin Luther King before an all-white Southern jury. You're not going to get anywhere with that within the civil rights community. And so they've convinced themselves of these of their own fake news, if you will, and they've already lost what their goal was. Their goal was to have people believe this was an independent, honest third jury that is going to make an independent, honest decision about a legitimate criminal prosecution. Nobody believes this is an independent, honest jury. Nobody believes this is an independent, honest judge. And nobody believes this is an independent, honest prosecution. So as such, they've already lost. I mean, what their real goal was here, to damage Trump in the court of public opinion, they've already lost. And you could see them whining throughout all social media and everywhere else.
Well, Hillary Clinton doing the rounds and repeating the talking point. 91 felony indictment, whatever charges. They just needed the talking point.
But the problem is you need people to believe in it. You need people to believe that the investigation created an independent inquiry, which created an independent indictment, which is independently true and justified. And the problem, saying somebody's been indicted 91 times means nothing if they think that's actually a sign of a problem with the system, the political weaponization of the system. They see the indictments as damning of the system, not damning of Trump. And they're just slowly starting to figure that out.
Now it's scheduled to last for 6 weeks. There was something that happened. I forget what happened. They're done with jury selection. Opening arguments start this week or this coming week.
I believe so, as far as I know. You in state court, a lot of state courts do 4-day trials because they save another day for all their motion practice and everything else. That's not true in federal court, but in state court, that's common. So I forget. I think it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, something like that. I think he excludes Wednesdays.
Well, he's going to have to exclude. I don't know what day of the week it falls on. They're going to have to exclude April 24th because that's the day that Trump is brought up on contempt charges for his Truth Social post. Robert, like I try not to get despaired, but I get despaired. I forget which hack it was. It was the guy with the gray hair, an old guy with gray hair. I forget his name, saying how Trump reposted Jesse Waters, a quote from Jesse Waters from Fox News. And this guy, people are going to know it because the video went viral on Twitter. He says, Trump reposted or retruthed a quote from Jesse Waters, and in so doing made it his own statement, attacking the jury, impugning the jury, accusing them of being activists on the bench. And I'm like, holy shit, they are actually using this gag order to say that Trump cannot quote mainstream news. And I'm like, how does anybody put up with that? But that's not one of the truth posts, as far as I understand, that he's being brought up on contempt for. One of the posts is him referring to Michael Cohen as a sleazebag. The other one is a guy named Mike Palmer. Forget his last name. Doesn't matter. Another one is talking about Stormy Daniels' letter that she said, I didn't have an affair with him. I said it in 2006, 2008, 2011. 5 times. I said I didn't have it, not because I was paid to say that, but because we didn't have an affair. He tweets that out and says, I wonder if the fake news is going to report on this. That's one of the elements of the contempt charges that are being brought against him. What do you think happens on the 24th? I mean, is it a foregone conclusion that they're going to slap him with a fine and then say next time you do it, it's jail time?
I'm sure, but all that does is set up more constitutional issues. I mean, it shows why the gag order is unconstitutional, because they're trying to prohibit Trump from exposing the fraudulent nature of this proceeding. And they don't want fraudulent witnesses, fraudulent prosecutors, fraudulent judges, fraudulently selected jury, in violation of all of Trump's constitutional rights. And so the jury's not supposed to be reading anything about their case. So how can a Trump public statement impact the jury when the jury has sworn under penalty of perjury they're not reading anything? I mean, that's a ludicrous claim that that's somehow jury intimidation. It has nothing to do with the jury. Jury's not supposed to be reading anything unless the judge is admitting, hey, we're all in on a big fraud, that we know that the jury's actually reading everything that's going on illegally, violating their oath, committing perjury right in front of the court. Unless that's going to be the claim, any statement about the jury cannot be intended for the jury. It's intended for the court of public opinion about how this is a fraudulent trial. And that's precisely, and then they're misusing and abusing gag order authority to do so. And it's pitiful. I mean, Good Logic brought a good challenge, and that court refused to issue a meaningful ruling, just denied it.
4 words, he said.
Yeah, exactly. And so now he's got to take it up through the whole, this is indicting the entire New York court system. We'll get into how the Pennsylvania court system is embarrassing itself and the Pennsylvania regulatory agencies embarrassing themselves. But this is what happens when you give these people power. They abuse the power. And what they're really, I mean, they really thought, we're going to rush through this trial. We're going to get a verdict. The people will believe it. They'll believe our big lie. We'll just say it over and over again, and people will believe that Donald Trump is really guilty of something significant. That and they're starting to get irritated as they see nobody believes their nonsense. Not even Democrats believe their nonsense. I mean, that everybody can see this for what it is. This is like the Klan putting Martin Luther King on trial and pretending the world would think it's an independent judgment. It's ludicrous. Harry Litman should be embarrassed that he ever could claim that this was going to be a legitimate legal proceeding. It is a joke. It is an embarrassment. It is a crock. And the fact that New York courts are not stepping in to correct it at the appellate level is damning of the New York justice system writ large. This is telling everybody, stay out of New York. That they have a justice system that would make banana republics look good by comparison. That is how bad and embarrassing this is.
I pulled up a great meme yesterday. Well, it wasn't even a meme; it was a short video of Putin clinging glasses with Kim Jong-un, and I said, like, they're making both of these guys look like Democrat leaders. But Robert,
by far,
I found it. Listen to this.
He appears to have violated the judge's gag order on
what's this guy's
mentions and attacks of jurors in his case.
Listen to this. It's not a joke. He said this.
Social media website tonight. Donald Trump reposted something posted by the 8 p.m. host on Fox.
I thought at this point he was going to say it's outrageous that he should be charged with contempt for this. Listen to where he goes.
Jesse Waters says they are catching undercover liberal activists lying to the judge in order to get on the Trump jury. And there's Donald Trump himself posting that on social media tonight, posting it for the jurors in his case to see, calling them.
See, that's the part that's a lie. The jurors have said they will not be reading, watching, reviewing any media. Definitely, they're not going to Donald Trump's social media feed.
Well, they might.
They are. What he's saying is, hey, we're all in on it. It's all a fix. The jurors are perjurers. The judge is a liar. The entire legal system is a fraud. So let's punish Trump for exposing the fact that it's a fraud.
Oh, it gets better, Robert.
Liars. Donald Trump calling his jurors who have already been seated liars, because what Jesse Waters is referring to there are the jurors, the 7 who have already been officially seated on that jury.
So now he's admitting that 7 people lied to get on the jury. and he's mad that it's being exposed to the world. This is why courts do not have the constitutional authority to gag anybody. And it's sad and pitiful outside of extraordinarily limited, restrained circumstances. This is a justice system that is so committed to the illusion of justice that it will go to great lengths to deny justice in the process, because it wants people to think its system is fair and impartial when it's not. This is a crock. This is an embarrassment to the rule of law. This will go down as one of the most disgraceful sets of cases in the history of American law. And what everybody defending any aspect of it, should be embarrassed, because they're people whose credibility you could never listen to again, because they're people who are saying they are happy and eager to weaponize the legal system in violation of all of our legal principles to go after their political opponents and adversaries.
Listen to the last 20 seconds of this.
Then he's saying that they have lied their way onto the jury. Donald Trump is endorsing that. Those words are the same as Donald Trump writing them himself.
That's news, by the way. That's news. Is an MSNBC anchor saying those words are his words by virtue of him saying someone else. Robert, it's ridiculous. And we are witnessing in real time who would have been happy to be a part of the lynch mob, in a different era. And I guess I'm proud to say I wouldn't have been, based on the present. So the gag order is ridiculous. He's going to be brought before the court for contempt charges on April 24th. I'll be following that. Joe Neerman made an Article 78 motion to try to ungag Trump. Swiftly denied as soon as he was able to get in front of a young judge who said, thank you, I've heard both sides. Your motion is denied. He's going to get to go before a 3-judge panel in, I don't know when, in a couple of weeks. He wants to get Dershowitz or Turley or a reputable, not that Joe Neerman is not reputable, but someone with a big name that it doesn't look like it's, someone like off the street, someone like me just wanted to say, hey, ungag him. Someone with reputation. Do you see a three-panel court doing anything different, Robert?
The law is crystal clear that this is an unconstitutional gag order. I mean, there's just really no doubt about it. And so the question is, how long will the New York courts allow this this illegal, unconstitutional behavior to go on by New York courts? That's really it. And it's been embarrassing that the New York courts, appellate courts, and higher courts have let this nonsense happen. And I think it's just because it reflects the political prejudice within the judicial branch in the state of New York to refuse to enforce the law and to refuse to enforce the Constitution. They're showing how unreliable and untrustworthy they are as an institution. And they don't seem to be getting that. Now, I think the irony with all this is doing all of this insanity, showing that they'll go to any lengths to rig a case, is only going to put more pressure on the Supreme Court. We'll see how much it shows up this week in the questions they ask. Put more pressure on them to grant broad immunity. Because right now, the Supreme Court is the only court that can save the judiciary from itself. This isn't just about rogue prosecutors. It's about rogue judges. It's the judicial system that looks to be a joke right now for the entire world to watch and witness. And as this New York case develops, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And so they see the juries getting rigged. They see the trial getting rigged. They see Trump not being allowed to discuss the fact that it's getting rigged, that he's ordered to be there so that he can't campaign for the next 6 weeks. I mean, it's a crock. I mean, to be honest with you, other governments, banana republics, have never gone this far. I mean, find me another example of anywhere else in the world where they've done this. You can't find one outside of assassinating people. We've done that too. And as you brought up, now you have Democrats wanting to revoke Secret Service protection. So you have the Biden administration wanting to kick its opponents off the ballot, both Trump and Robert Kennedy.
Put him in jail.
Trying to jail Donald Trump and trying to get both of them killed. Deny Secret Service protection to Robert Kennedy. And now they want to take it away from Donald Trump.
And Robert, I'm not being hyperbolic. It's nothing short of trying to get them so exposed that they can be killed.
Absolutely.
They call it the Disgraced Former Protectees Act, or denying infinite security. Infinite. I mean, life is finite, so it's not infinite. And government resources allocated toward convicted and extremely dishonorable former protectees. I made the joke in yesterday's vlog. They may as well just call it the Epstein Act. They want. And some effing jackass says, "Oh, you really think they'd put Trump in a dangerous prison?" I'm like, you can't be that stupid. Like, you can only be an absolute bot, like an AI bot, or just a malicious scoundrel. And it might be more the latter than the former. They want him to get killed, and they want to put him in a position where he can get killed.
Yeah. It's the same thing doing to Robert Kennedy. And they denied him Secret Service protection 6 times. It's obvious what they're doing. I mean, America's just now reaching full-blown banana republic stage. And I mean, we have a bunch of members of the House of Representatives spending a bunch of money for the borders of Ukraine, while they won't spend any money on the U.S., where our Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has proven to capitulate to the intelligence community as soon as they smack them around a little. And they're waving foreign flags on the House floor. I mean, as some people said, if you want to talk about insurrection, that's insurrection. That's insurrectionary ideas and attitude. Waving a foreign government's flag on our floor and spending American taxpayer dollars to help the money laundering continue in Ukraine for a foreign government. I mean, and they seem to be clueless that they are losing the American public, and their reaction is just punish them more, lock them up more, threaten them with death more. That they just know power. They don't know principle. They only know power. And so the only question is whether a Supreme Court that values the integrity of the independence of the judicial branch will save it from itself by giving Trump broad immunity.
And the way it could do that, I mean, I wouldn't imagine the Supreme Court is going to come out and say, if Trump is dealing cocaine as president, that should fall within presidential immunity, though I understand the argument for why some might believe that. But they'll say,
well, it depends. If you're Poppy Bush or George W. Bush or Bill Clinton, you institutionally dealt.
I realized that's a bad example, because that's exactly what the CIA or the FBI, CIA was doing in LA. A bad example, but give me an example that's totally unrelated to any act as president. They'll say immunity shouldn't apply to that, but anything even remotely.
What's called purely private acts. It's Trump's own argument is based on the constitutional history that purely private acts that have nothing to do with you being president are things that then those things are not subject to immunity because you didn't take them as presidential acts. I mean, they've done this in legislative and judicial immunity context. So, for example, if you are doing a legislative act, you're immune from criminal prosecution from that legislative act as well. Same with judges. There's some mistaken theories out there that immunity doesn't apply to criminal cases. That's not the case. They've said if you're doing a judicial act, immunity applies. If you're doing a legislative act, it applies. If it's not a judicial act, not a legislative act, or in the president's case, not an executive act, then it doesn't. Then that's when it doesn't apply. The big difference is the executive vesting clause of the Constitution is the broadest. Judicial power comes with certain limits. Legislative power comes with certain limits, not executive power. All the power of the executive was vested in one man, the elected president of the United States of America. And what that means is it attaches to every single thing he did while president, unless it had absolutely nothing to do with the presidency. And here, like the New York case, their theory is that he did it to maintain his position and to get elected and to stay elected. So they made it connected to the presidency in order to tag on that federal felony nonsense, the federal crime to make the state crime elevate to a felony. So same in the Florida case, that almost all the allegations concern whether his acts as president were correct or not when he left and took the documents with him in the first place. The Georgia case all concerns acts he took while president. DC case all concern acts he took while president. That's why they can get rid of almost all of these charges, really all of them in my view, by saying presidential immunity applies, and that you're granted immunity with one exception, which is if you're impeached and convicted.
Mm-hmm.
If you're impeached and convicted, then your immunity is taken away. But unless you're impeached and convicted pursuant to the constitutional process, you have complete immunity for anything you did while president. And because if it's any other way, then as well articulated in the reply brief on behalf of President Trump that was filed just this past week, then you're in a position where the president is at the extortionate whim of any prosecutor anywhere in the country during or after his presidency.
It's what drives me crazy is the people are spouting off the line. Nobody's above the law. There's a law that applies specifically
no one's
to the
above
president.
The law. It means the courts are not above the law. It means the prosecutors are not above the law.
No,
and
but
the law here is the president is immune unless the Senate convicts him.
Well,
and here he's been acquitted.
That's the whole issue. Is like nobody's above the law, and there's a very specific law that applies only to the president. And so, Robert, going back to the Disgrace Act or the Epstein Act, I mean, it's never going to pass, correct? Like they just do. What happens with it after they put forward this proposal, the proposed bill? Does it?
Oh, it won't. Yeah, it won't pass. No.
Okay, good. Not that it matters. It's just the mere act of doing it, and then you incite these lunatics to say "Die MAGA, die," because now we've gotten our political permission slip to wish death on our political rivals. Okay,
no
so
doubt.
there's
and what the Supreme Court said all the way back to Marbury versus Madison is the acts of a president are, quote, never be examinable by the courts. Never can be examined by the courts. Never is never, isn't it? And examined is examined. So the only question is whether it's a presidential act. But I think the Supreme Court has almost no. And by the way, credit to the reply brief. There were certain analogies I wanted all of them making. Is remind everybody up there that was appointed by different presidents how if there's no immunity, every single person who appointed them can be subject to prison. And they did a really good job of hammering that. In particular, I said hammer home, especially after that DC appeals court judge made the big deal about SEAL Team 6. And I always thought it was a ludicrous comparison because it's like Barack Obama did do that. He did order people to murder his political opponents. He called them terrorists. So what? He ordered the murder of an American citizen without any due process of law. So that would have been the right answer then. But they've now come back to that. They come back to over and over again. They cite if there's no presidential immunity, then Barack Obama can be criminally prosecuted for ordering the murder of people. So do you really want that to happen, liberal Democratic judges and justices? Do you think you'll always have the power? Do you want your side to be subject to these rules? Because if you don't, you better step in now and put an end to it. And then they pointed out other good examples. George W. Bush lying to get us into the Iraqi war. the various allegations of drugs and other activities
But
with past presidents.
let me stop you there. Not mistaken to get us into war, lying to get us into war, because apparently, by all the retrospective evidence, they knew there were not the weapons of mass destruction that they were claiming there were when they claimed that there were weapons of mass destruction to get us involved in a war. A lie, not a mistake.
Yeah, I think the court is going to rule because of the insanity that the Democrats have shown, and because of they're not because they care one iota about Trump. Very few of those justices care an iota about Trump. What they do care about is the integrity of the judicial process and how the judicial process looks to the world. And they're seeing that this is just like when we predicted 9-0 on the ballot decision. And some people were surprised by that. It's the same logic. They have no choice. Now, I don't think this will be 9-0, but it wouldn't surprise me if some Democrats drop off and join a majority, because this is embarrassing. This is humiliating.
Well, it's scary. It's actually scary because
It's
there's
terrifying for ordinary people, but it's humiliating of the entire judicial system. I mean, the judicial system's confidence comes entirely from the American people's belief in it. The moment they no longer believe in it, it has no power. So that's its problem. Its power is predicated on belief. And the Supreme Court can see this sideshow taking place. This makes the New York civil justice system look terrible. Criminal justice system look terrible. They've just been through all the insanity with the Georgia case involving the obvious conflicts of interest there. And it's one embarrassment after another, after another, after another. And they've got to stop the bleeding by saving the courts from themselves, by stepping in and saying the president has broad immunity. It's also the right constitutional interpretation. And there's a lot of good public policy behind it, because otherwise the president's subject to the whim of a politically motivated prosecutor. That's not a tolerant. And they couldn't give the only pitch of Jack Smith was, don't worry, we'll only do this to Trump. This is like the New York governor. Don't worry, we'll only do this to Trump. Well, nobody believes you, first of all. But secondly, that's not persuasive to a Supreme Court. It's like, that's your argument?
Well, but also that's an admission of selective prosecution. I mean, as much as now, speaking of selective prosecution, Robert, and unfairness, the other issue coming out of New York this week is Letitia James challenging the Surety in the Engoron New York nipple judge alleged fraud scheme, where Trump got some. It's not a Cayman Island insurance company, but he got a bond company that's outside of the state of New York to post his Surety, $175 million. Letitia James filed an opposition or contestation claiming that the Surety was not Surety enough. It was not guaranteed enough, because the asset or the collateral of that bond is a bank account held by the Trump Irrevocable Trust, which is still under the control of Trump, so he can take money out of it. And if it's not replenished to $175 million within 2 days, then there'll be an issue. Second issue was this company apparently engages, I can't really pretend to understand what shadow insurance means, but apparently they collateralize their,
That's very common.
Okay. Well, and I'll ask you to elaborate.
People have multiple levels of insurance of risk.
She's challenging the Surety, and it's Monday. It's tomorrow, the hearing on whether or not Trump is going to be required to post another bond within 7 days. Highlight the absurdity that Engoron tried to enjoin Trump and the businesses from borrowing money from banks in New York for 3 years. Now Letitia James is saying your Surety company is not registered in New York, and therefore it's not secure enough. What's the worst case scenario that Trump has to go? What bonding companies post or guarantee $175 million in bonds?
Well, it's very limited, but I mean, it shows how obsessed they are with bankrupting Trump, locking Trump up, denying him access to campaign funds, denying him means of campaigning, attacking him in the court of public opinion. That's what the legal process is for. And what this really does, it will put more pressure on the appeals court if Engoron goes and does another crazy thing, for them to step in and reverse it. I mean, they really should have not required any bond under the absurd cases of this case. But what's happening at the New York appeals court, like if they don't take up good logic and reverse what the trial court has done, now they look like a joke. they look like partisan frauds. They look like hacks. They're damning the entire New York judicial system.
I don't think they care.
You're insane if you continue to do business in New York if you can avoid it.
But
That's
now-
the message they're sending to the entire world.
With respect to this, hypothetically, Leticia James, Engeron grants Leticia James motion and says, okay, you have to post another bond within 7 days. There is a constitutional challenge to this, right? Excessive fines.
Yeah.
Okay, so Supreme Court could get involved even in New York on the state level case. It's wild. Okay. I think
they don't have any sense of self-restraint. It's extraordinary watching it. No sense of political wisdom. I mean, it's incredible. And it's like the Georgia Court of Appeals. Are they going to allow a corrupt, partisan, perjured prosecutor to continue to handle that case? Yeah, if they do, then the Georgia Court of Appeals looks like a joke. I mean, it tells you how bad the professional managerial class, as a class, is out of touch with the real world, that they aren't immediately stepping in. I mean, even Bill Barr is saying, by the way, this goes too far, right? I mean, when you lose Bill Barr, who hates Trump, who sabotaged Trump's entire presidency from the time he got in, particularly in the last year, on election issues, on Epstein, on the Biden corruption, all of it. When he's out there screaming, this is crazy, it's the sensible part of the deep state saying, by the way, we're losing this court of public opinion battle. We're losing. We're going to be the ones that end up on the stake. And you know, when will courts wake up? When will they realize this has gone too far? Well, you know, but I think I am hopeful that the Supreme Court will put a kibosh on at least 80%, 90% of it.
There's nothing more coming out of New York, right? We've covered it, or Trump. Robert, let me bring up some Rumble rants before we get too far behind, and then get into our next subject. If Justin and the Uniparty are here in the U.S., understood economics, they wouldn't be in government. King of Biltong says, good afternoon from Anton's Meat and Eat. Free shipping on your Biltong using code Viva. It's delicious stuff, by the way. Biltong USA, Anton USA, gift on all Biltong orders placed today through Tuesday. Happy Sunday. Robert, upgrade your machine, bro. Vacuum tubes are so 1950s. That was from Ice Knee 2103. It's why is it that New York is allowed to enforce federal election law, but Texas is not allowed to enforce federal immigration law? Good question. Stefan Og, with a lot of G's in there, says, any update on the Rumble versus Google antitrust and the USA versus Google antitrust trials? Robert, has there been? I haven't heard any news.
No update, no.
What happens if
they're still ongoing?
What happens if there's a hung jury, another 6-week trial around July or August, says Scumbag 5050. Karolevsky, let's invite New York City, LA, San Francisco to become independent city-states. They can pay a fee each year for the U.S. military to protect them. Tony in Carmel, isn't immunity necessary for peaceful transition of power? Yeah. And Jane Catherine Berry, reaction to Rep. Omar, Raskin, and Stansbury push for Supreme Court accountability with new legislation, Judicial Ethics Enforcement Act, ensures Inspector Generals for SCOTUS. Robert, I haven't heard about that. Have you heard about that?
Well, there's some of that makes sense, some of that doesn't. It's their attempt to govern the Supreme Court, and there's efforts afoot, of course, to still stack the court. They're just not getting anywhere at the moment. Because, I mean, that's just who they are. I mean, it just shows that all they care about is power. Yep. There's no sense of principle with these people whatsoever.
That's what makes it very difficult to negotiate with them. I don't know if you saw my interview with Jason Palmer on Friday. It's a very interesting thing. I'm predicting, by the way, Jason Palmer is going to be voting Republican in 4 years. He might be running for president in 2028. It'll be independent or for the or for the GOP. We'll see. But okay, Robert, what do we move on to now?
Well, I mean, with speaking of out of control, well, we could go transition two places. If we're dealing with the corruption in the justice system by the Biden Justice Department, we have their effort to dismiss and intervene in the Brooke Jackson case against Pfizer. We filed our opposition this week to that. And then we've got all the craziness taking place in Pennsylvania by out of control regulatory agencies that are just lost the script.
Let's do Pennsylvania, because nobody's going to believe what's going on in Pennsylvania. If I may ask, and I don't know the answer to the question, are you formally engaged in the matter, or is it?
Yeah, so they have retained my services, and we're trying to do
Excellent.
whatever we can. There's a crowdfunding out there for them. There are a couple of blue collar guys. They don't have a lot of resources, so it's something that 1776 Law Center is supporting because of how crazy it is.
So
It's
you do, is it livestock? No, that's the Lancaster article. I'll pull up the Give Send Go when I can. Is it Noble Solutions LLC Give Send Go? Okay,
Yep,
I'll bring this up in a second. Robert, so you do a bourbon with Barnes on this. It was Wednesday night, and I catch up on your bourbon with Barnes when I go for my jog in the morning, and I'm listening to this and I'm saying, it's impossible. It's impossible. Two individuals, are they Amish or they're not Amish
no,
themselves?
they just principally work for the Amish.
Okay. They work with Amish farmers in Pennsylvania. They're not vets. From what I understand, they are in the reproductive
Yeah,
business.
they're basically in the getting more cattle from cattle business.
Breeding. I don't know if
That's it.
qualified
They help with breeding.
and so they perform ultrasounds to determine if a
If it
cow
works.
has taken.
Yeah,
Bottom
that's it.
line, these two guys are whisked off, unbeknownst to anybody, whisked off to jail based on a warrant. Okay, they're jailed with no bail for 30 days based on this warrant, which accuses them ultimately. Or it didn't accuse them of anything. It just says they're in violation of a court order from a prior proceeding. Nobody knows what it is. Jailed without bail for 30 days. It turns out it's for not paying a fine in an administrative proceeding.
Well, supposedly, it turns out that may not be the case either.
Allegedly, from what I understood based on the Lancaster press as well, they didn't pay a fine in some administrative proceeding where they were allegedly fined for performing acts of veterinarianism, if you call it that, by performing ultrasounds on cows. And they say this is not veterinary medicine. We've been told don't pay the fine, whatever. Jailed based on a warrant that looks like it's printed off of some high school presentation saying the BPOA, the Bureau of Pennsylvania, I forget what it was. It was like a professional administration saying, sheriff, arrest them for being in violation of and they give a bunch of docket numbers. These two guys were actually jailed and still in jail now as of this time.
One's in Lancaster County Jail, one's in York County Jail.
And
again, never criminally charged. We're never even named parties to any case ever.
On the basis allegedly of having not paid a fine for practicing veterinary medicine without a license, but that consisted of ultrasounds. On the Lancaster Agricultural website, whatever it was, they ran a poll, Robert, and it said, do you think they should be jailed for having performed ultrasounds? And the majority of people said yes, from what I remember. So I have no faith in it.
Who's on that particular site?
So they're in jail now, no bail for 30 days for not paying a fine, allegedly at worst case scenario. What's going on? Fill in the rest for those who may not know.
It appears it has no relationship to a fine because that would raise other issues of imprisonment for debt, which would have its own violation. And the way any kind of fine process is supposed to go through the local court process, local courts have no record of either one of these guys. When we searched the court records, we couldn't find anything. It turns out the Commonwealth Court has a sealed secret file concerning the case. It's like, why is there a sealed secret file that's resulting in people being arrested without charge of a crime? So dig in a little bit further, we find there's an order of commitment that they got some judge to sign out of the Commonwealth Court. The Commonwealth Court doesn't have criminal jurisdiction. They don't do orders of commitment. Maybe that's why it looks like it was printed off some 1890s sheet somewhere.
If you could, though, what is the Commonwealth Court versus Civil Court versus Supreme Court versus Criminal Court? What is the Commonwealth
Yeah, they're
Court?
all different in Pennsylvania. So you got the Court of Common Pleas, which is what your typical state trial court is across the country. They have civil and criminal jurisdiction. There's traffic courts and magisterial courts that have lesser jurisdiction and authority. Then you have the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And then you have the superior courts that have appellate jurisdiction in some cases. The Commonwealth Court is very limited. All it does is handle cases involving the state government, but not criminal cases, only civil cases. So it handles certain appeals. So the Amos Miller appeal, the government is appealing, goes to this Commonwealth Court. They're separately elected statewide. And what they're supposed to be doing is monitoring and supervising the state agencies. They're not supposed to be a rubber stamp for the state agencies. So it's still not crystal clear what's happened here, because all efforts to get the file have been denied to date.
While they're still in jail.
While they're still in jail.
How long do you have to wait for a habeas corpus motion to be presented and adjudicated?
We're going to have to file it. We're going to file it next week with the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania has original jurisdiction over writs of habeas corpus. Other courts do too, but it also is the only appellate court for the Commonwealth Court, is the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania. So the Commonwealth Court doesn't even have habeas authority. And that gives you an idea that how they got roped into this is not clear. It appears that the Pennsylvania Board of Veterinary Medicine is colluding with people in private business in Pennsylvania who want a monopoly on the Amish market. In other words, they want Amish farmers to have to go to licensed veterinarians, licensed vets, for things that don't have anything to do with veterinary medicine. Veterinary medicine is limited to medicating the animal, things of that nature. Not this. Ultrasounds are not anywhere in the vet statute. In fact, I talked to legislators who helped draft the statute. They're like, that's deliberate. I mean, that in fact, nothing related to farming is supposed to be part of the veterinary board. That is solely for people who are providing medical care to people's private animals. That's what that was supposed to be there for, not to deal with farming at any level. So but what is some people who want access to that Amish market and want to be able to surcharge in that Amish market are trying to use licensure authority to do so. They filed a bogus complaint with the Board of Veterinary Medicine. The Board of Veterinary Medicine never even checked whether, hold on a second, do we even have authority here? Because their authority is supposed to be limited to actual licensed vets. So but of course, this is what happens when you give any bureaucracy authority. They will abuse it. You give them power, they'll abuse it. That's what they have proven time and again. So I'm against licensures altogether. So you're giving a small group of people power to govern the rest of us. It doesn't make us safer. It makes us less safe. So the Board of Veterinary Medicine goes after an entity, but it doesn't appear to me ever name these individuals at all, and was doing the large parts of the proceeding with all of it in secret. So they didn't even know what was going on. So you have a board. Imagine if somebody said, it took you away to jail tomorrow, Viva, and they said later on, well, it has to do with you're not a vet. You're like, well, of course I'm not a vet, right? I mean, it's that level of insanity. They're reaching into a place they have no legal authority to reach into, first of all. Then secondly, apparently it's not even necessarily relates to a fine. Supposedly it's a contempt order about complying with a subpoena that was an unlawful subpoena in the first place. So there's those issues. So then you get a little bit further, and it appears that the state specifically requested an unlawful order of imprisonment. This is what happens when these bureaucracies go crazy and courts don't exercise their supervisory obligations. So it appears that, here's how contempt works. Punitive contempt is a criminal case. It requires you have right to counsel, you be individually named, all the rest. Civil contempt has to give you the keys to your own prison cell. So it can say, we'll issue you this fine, but you won't have to pay it if you do something that's within your control. So in the subpoena case, it's until you produce the documents, you will owe X amount of money. All right. So, but that's it. But that's not what these orders are. These orders are criminal contempt. They're not given any means to the keys to their own jail cell.
But even if it's criminal contempt, there's a hearing before a criminal court.
Supposed to be, but not here. No hearing, no notice, no being named a party to the case. None of it. These were secret orders of a secret court ordering people in prison who were never even notified, never even made it a formal party to the case. This is why we kept looking by their name, couldn't find it because there's no court case involving them. So I was like, this is insane. And what it is either, I don't know what happened. Either a judge was just rubber stamping things he had no legal authority to do, and did so deliberately, which means there's a real problem with the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. They're supposed to be supervising people not engaged in illegal behavior on behalf of state agencies themselves. Because here's the other issue. So there's all the constitutional requirements that come with criminal contempt. There's also Pennsylvania rules, which Pennsylvania law makes clear that Commonwealth Court doesn't have this power. They don't give them that. In fact, they don't give any court the power to issue contempt people in prison for more than 15 days. And if it's based on a fine or a subpoena, you can't. All you can do is give a fine. You can't ever lock them up. So this is something that even a first-year law student would know they have no authority to do. And yet you have the protho notary, that's like their version of a court clerk, complicit in this, ordering a sheriff to have people arrested and imprisoned that the protho notary has no power to do. A judge signing an order of imprisonment from the Commonwealth Court who has no power to do it. A state agency requesting it that has no power to do it. And what apparently they don't realize is if you're as a judge and you do something that's clearly outside your jurisdiction, you no longer have immunity from civil suit. So the same is true of a prosecutor. If you request something that you know is illegal, that's outside the judge's authority, no immunity for that. That's not a legitimate prosecutorial act. If you're a court clerk and you do something like send a letter demanding someone be arrested, which you should know you'd have no such power to do, no immunity. You can be individually liable. So it appears, we gave the state the chance to fix this. Said, look, this is insane. Fix it now. This violates Pennsylvania law, federal law, constitutional law, you name it, it violates it. So fix it now and it help limit the scope of your own damages. They refused to. In fact, they said, no, you have to make an appearance in the case before we can even talk about it because it's a secret case.
An appearance where?
Well, that was my response. So I'm supposed to appear for people who are not made parties in a case that doesn't appear to exist on the docket. And so they're hiding behind, this is what happens when you give regulatory agencies this level of power. And when you get courts that see their job as protecting the government rather than protecting the citizen. And then they end up becoming complicit and culpable in these issues. And several of them have subjected themselves to potential civil suit. Clearly, they're not exercising any independent authority, that they're just acting as a rubber stamp for corrupt actions of the state. And so we'll have to file a original writ of habeas corpus with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Hope the Pennsylvania Supreme Court acts expeditiously and releases them immediately. And then we have to look at federal civil rights suits because they have no authority where they're anytime you give any licensing board authority, one of the first things they like to do is go regulate people that don't have licenses, that are not supposed to be before them. And they sucker state legislatures into saying, well, you got to watch out for the people that we've disciplined, we've taken away their license. We need to have authority over them. They're like, oh, okay. And by doing so, they give them the green light to just decide that they're going to do whatever they want to whomever they want, because they're going to decide that you should be licensed, even though there's no legal basis for that whatsoever in this case.
Robert, I'm going to bring this up. I'll show the give, send, go again. I brought that up here. Look at this, Robert. From Lancaster Farming. Should Rusty Hare and Ethan Wentworth face consequences for using ultrasound equipment on dairy cattle without a veterinary license? Robert.
When there's no requirement by law to have a veterinary license to do use ultrasound on cattle. Never has been.
But this should be depressing for every human. You got 60% of the people who have a strong opinion, probably not knowing.
People that are part of that, reading that, are part of the conspiracy to get monopolize access to the Amish and use licensures to do so. And it's not just what they're going after with Amos Miller. It's a broader pattern of the state of Pennsylvania weaponizing all of their bureaucracy to try to use licensures and permits to monopolize and control the entire population.
Has anyone been in touch with them directly?
Yeah. Oh, people on our team have been.
Okay, good. How are they doing? like on a human level?
Well, some stuff was improving. I mean, for a while, one of them had no phone access and a bunch of issues, but it's starting to get better as as more people started realizing. Well, the York County Sheriff's Office and Lancaster County Sheriff's Office admitted that actually they'd never seen anything like this in their lives. Now, in my view, they still have a risk of liability because, some court sends you something and you just enforce it. You need to know whether that court has that authority to do that. And the Protho Notary of the Commonwealth Court has no such power. The Commonwealth Court has no such power. And yet it's just exercising it out of the blue, locking people up because an agency asked them to. I mean, that's literally what happened. And it's insane. But it violates all kinds of, but it's a major scandal in Pennsylvania because the Commonwealth Court is one of the most powerful courts in the state. And if you have some of their judges implicated in this, it is very embarrassing for what's going on in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they're just following following orders, Robert. Okay, so a writ for habeas corpus is going to be issued.
Outside of that, they have to look at federal civil rights claims once we find out exactly all the backstory of all this, because there's no basis whatsoever. What they wanted the subpoena for. Tell us all your clients, right? I mean, it's all intended to get a monopoly. It has nothing to do with veterinary medicine. If they don't know that, they should know that, and by law, I mean. There's a whole bunch of exceptions and exclusions that make clear that this is not where veterinary medicine applies. I get that some corrupt people connected to the vet community in Pennsylvania want to do it that way. And this is what the complaint has been about licensure from day one. It creates an antitrust monopoly using state power to artificially increase cost, expense, and access by saying you have to be licensed to do things you didn't used to have to be licensed to do. But either way here, there's no licensure basis for the ultrasound claim whatsoever. None. What they're doing doesn't require they be vets. Doesn't require anybody be vets. And so the whole thing is based on a fraud. And then they're trying to get into people's private records that is also violates Pennsylvania law, the way in which they were trying to go about getting the subpoena. They didn't make them in proper parties. They didn't make the case publicly accessible so anybody could know what the heck was going on. But I mean, this is the ultimate power of the state to lock you up. And that's what you see how these agencies think. You don't do what we say, we'll lock you up. They have just no legal power to do so. And you have individual attorneys who might become individual defendants who might not have immunity coverage. And it might even include judicial officials. It's an extraordinary, I haven't seen any case quite like this in a long time.
I love it.
Extraordinary scandal.
I love it when you make judicial threats, and only people in the industry know just how serious what you're suggesting is.
The judge is doing something that's not a judicial act. They're not immune, and there needs to be, the judiciary is losing its way in some of these cases. So it relates to another case that we're getting involved in. A lady's being criminally prosecuted, facing up to 2 years in state prison because she tape recorded. The allegation is she tape recorded her own court proceeding.
Which, so I'm not familiar with that. I could steel man the argument, but what is this case about?
So yeah, I mean, I just found out about it this weekend. It's apparently a woman who was going through a divorce, didn't trust how things were going in the court, wanted a separate court reporter on top of the official court reporter because her husband had a lot of political power in the local community. According to the statements that have been made in court filings, so I don't know whether this is necessarily the case or not, but this is what this is alleged against her. What is alleged is that she recorded the proceeding that was involving her own divorce, because what she found was the official court reporter was not accurately reporting the proceeding. So her concerns came out to be true. And when she exposed this, how do you think the Pennsylvania legal system handled it? They decided to charge her with the crime for recording her own court proceeding.
I can understand this one in theory only because of how strict the court is about recording that which you're not allowed to record. I understand the rationale. The only question is, like, what is the practical solution to this type of problem where you're
Correct.
precluded from recording the
And in
corrupt
my
proceeding.
view, you have both the right to open access to court proceedings and the right to First Amendment rights. I think this law is unconstitutional.
Well,
It's very rarely been challenged, and the problem you have is, who do you have to ask to declare it unconstitutional? The same judges who are imposing the rule in the first place.
well,
And it's an inherent conflict in that regard. It's why they shouldn't be doing these proceedings, in my view. They should never have legislative and executive power. But putting that aside, all this does is invite skepticism of the legal system. So, like in the Amos Miller case, the sheriffs and bailiffs told journalists that they couldn't even take notes. That's how it's being interpreted. So it was only the state-approved media would allow any. These are supposed to be open proceedings. Our trials didn't used to be in courtrooms. They used to be out open in the public. So how is it okay to prohibit recording something, especially when you're a party to the case? You just want a really accurate record and you don't trust the court reporter to do the record. I mean, to me, there's major constitutional problems with treating this as a crime.
And
we'll be bringing First Amendment and other challenges in that case.
Just to steelman it, though, the argument's going to be, if you want to get the official hearing, you can order the audio and then have it transcribed by a stenographer.
But in many of these cases, there's no audio available.
There's a problem.
Just the court reporter just doing their version.
Okay.
And in some cases, there's no court reporter. Right? That happens frequently, where there's no court reporter. But under this law, you're not allowed to record it, even if there's no court reporter. So that's, to me, this is a violation of people's right to open access to the courts and a violation of First Amendment rights of the press and of speech and association concerning legal matters. And all this does is hurt courts. Nobody gets more confidence in the court when the courts say, hey, you can't take notes. You can't record things. That makes people skeptical of the court. This is what the Supreme Court said a long time ago about abuse of contempt power as well. Said you can't prohibit public criticism of judges. All that's going to do, aside from violating the Constitution, is make people more skeptical of judges. So if you believe in the court system, then you don't want these rules to exist. And so I want to challenge this. But the judge stuck to his word, and in the Amos Miller case, denied the government's request. So the government is now appealing it to the same Commonwealth Court that's implicated in this other scandal. So it's even though, by the way, people in the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture have publicly admitted to people that they know they have no legal right to control Amos Miller selling his food outside of the state. And yet they're telling the courts just the opposite, because that's how power mad these people are. So thanks to everybody who stood up for Amos Miller. The judge, stood up with what he said he was going to do, just going to follow the law, and ruled in Amos Miller's favor. And so that's why that's being appealed. But you can get, if you live outside the state of Pennsylvania, then now is the time, if you want to get it, Amos Miller Organic Farm, to get some of Amos's great products that are out there.
And just so everybody knows, I don't
know if we're sold out of the maple syrup, but there still might be some maple syrup fundraisers still available too.
And so everybody knows, I'm only steel manning the argument. I wholeheartedly agree with Robert. The idea that you can't record court proceedings, they should be public with the utmost of exceptions.
Broadcast too.
Ooh,
this law, by the way, is the reason why courts are not even allowed. Even if a judge wants to broadcast a case, the judge is not allowed to under this rule. And I think that's deeply problematic. The court system does not benefit from secrecy. That was the whole point of the Star Chamber system. Doesn't benefit from official stenographers. That doesn't help us whatsoever in the court of public opinion, getting people to have confidence and faith in the independence and integrity of our judicial process.
Robert, before we get into the next subject, let me just do one thing here. The problem is that you have boomers like my father who believe the regulation is a good thing, is good, and there to protect people, which it's not. T1990. I was in that boat for a very long time. I felt better eating FDA approved. I was in there. Sammy says, what were the ultrasounds for? Were they for confirming positive pregnancy, or were they using ultrasound to assist in procedure like artificial insemination, embryo transfer. Icheni. Viva, my screen name reference to Budisha's tribe, pronounced T like pronoun, Che like censor, Say like censor, Ni like the knights. Iseni. Fleet Lord Avatar, we got the give, send, go for the Noble. We got that, and I've shared that. Have you two heard of the decoy voice? He might be someone you might want to be interested in doing a video with. I'm going to screen grab that. Boom. Jane Catherine Berry, reaction to Rep. Omar Raskin's stance where he pushed for Supreme Court accountability. Okay, we got that one too. Isn't immunity necessary for the people? Okay, we got that. Okay, we're done. So, Robert, what was the other power gone crazy? It had to do with Biden and Title IX. Oh yeah, reading stuff into the
there's
law.
Title IX, but there's also the corruption. Is the Brooke Jackson case the most brazen, most corrupt effort to stop a False Claims Act case in American legal history?
Oh, son of a gun! I screen grabbed what you sent me earlier. I'm going to get that in a second. What's the status of this now? So Brooke Jackson, went after Pfizer in a qui tam claim. Now the government is coming and says what we talked about a long time ago. We're going to take it over and kill it because we don't want you investigating our behavior. The rationale was what exactly, Robert?
The official public policy of the Biden administration is the COVID vaccines are good, so no case can be allowed to go forward that would suggest that public policy is wrong.
All right. Now, if I may bring this up, may I bring this up? Wendenhall's affidavit? Okay. How do I do the thing like this?
So, yeah, we submitted an extensive memorandum in opposition to the government's motion to intervene and the government's motion to dismiss. And as part of that, submitted extensive declarations under penalty of perjury of multiple medical experts, as well as many of the studies and the other documents and data and information that's come out from the crowdsourced information from the FOIA request of the Pfizer records that revealed just how much Pfizer lied. Pfizer lied and people died. That's the core of this case. But the Biden administration doesn't want anybody to know that. So they would like the judge to participate in hushing it all up.
Warner Mendenhall, declare and state it. It's very short, guys. It's 3 pages, but 2 of them are not full. I am one of Brooke Jackson's attorneys in this matter and make this statement in support of her motion. The declaration is based on my personal knowledge. Okay, fine. If I called as witness, I would say this. I just want to make sure there's no addresses in here. Brooke Jackson with counsel met with the Department of Justice on November 16, 2023. We informed the DOJ of additional witnesses, deaths and injuries at other trial sites unreported by Pfizer. This is a lawyer. Got something to lose for this. At the meeting, the DOJ never advised Ms. Jackson of any perceived deficiencies or burdens on the United States caused by her actions. Okay, so she's bringing it up and they're saying, doesn't hurt us. We clarified we would proceed with the litigation and bear the burdens of discovery because it comes at a cost. We discussed the remarkable worldwide private sector science and crowdsourced document review and data analysis bolstering this case and exposing DNA contamination, which has now been admitted. The only question is whether or not it has consequences, vaccine ingredients, genetic effects, and other adverse events, which are now widely accepted as fact. It's just a question of whether or not it's a meaningful number. Before the filing of the motion, yada, yada, we had LR7 phone call. Robert, what is it? Okay. On March 30th, we tried to determine unsuccessfully the basis for the motion to intervene. There was no coherent explanation about why exposing fraud in the clinical trials would be contrary to United States public health policy, and attached to a bunch of documents. So, Robert, their excuse, I'll share this with, have we shared this on Locals? I'll do it right now. Let me save that. Robert, their excuse for exposing the fraud, intervening to prevent the exposure of alleged potential fraud was what?
That the Biden administration thinks COVID vaccines are good. And so nothing that could expose the COVID vaccines as bad can happen. I mean that it was one of the weakest, lamest arguments for intervention. And really they're arguing from power. They're saying, hey, judge, this is the United States government. You better do what we tell you to do because that's the end of it. And the law is that they have to have good cause to intervene. And their basis to dismiss has to be a reasoned basis related to the litigation. They have no evidence about the litigation whatsoever. Nobody's willing to put... Now, one of the DOJ prosecutors involved used to work at the FDA and may herself be implicated or compromised by what might come out of discovery. So here's where the confusion is between the government and who represents the government. The government is the American taxpayer. Brooke Jackson is representing the American taxpayer. She is representing the constitutional exercise of governmental power. These corrupt actors in the Justice Department and with the Biden administration are themselves culpable for the illegality of what took place here. So they don't want to be on the hook. The Biden administration doesn't want anybody to know that they tried to force this vaccine on a bunch of people when they knew or should have known that it wasn't, at least at some point along the way, that it wasn't in fact a vaccine, that it wasn't safe, it wasn't effective. So that even if the government didn't know, they don't want to be blamed for their bad choices in trusting Pfizer. Because that becomes the question. Why was this mandated? Why was this publicly broadcast? Why did the Biden administration continue to spend money on this product that they knew was dangerous and counterproductive? Because it served their political interest? Because key people at Pfizer are high up in the U.S. government, the Justice Department, and the FDA? Because the Biden administration has a tight tie with, basically they're saying, look, don't expose the corruption of high-ranking government officials by allowing this case against Pfizer to go forward. That's what they're saying. That's the only logical inference from their nonsensical opposition. And so we use it as an opportunity to present all the evidence that's now been gathered in the court of public opinion. And a range of high-ranking scientists and doctors filed sworn statements under penalty of perjury in this case in support of Brooke Jackson. We included all the different studies, surveys, and other findings by independent groups that show there's no doubt. For those people who don't remember, the agreement that Pfizer made with the Trump Defense Department was that they would deliver a safe, effective vaccine for the prevention of COVID-19.
Safe, effective vaccine for the prevention of transmission.
Not that it would be a therapeutic, by the way. That was separate. Not that it would be a diagnostic tool. That it would be an inoculation tool. That it would inoculate. That it would prevent infection. That it would prevent transmission. And what they delivered was dangerous, ineffective, not even a vaccine, didn't inoculate against anything, and didn't prevent COVID-19. So they committed fraud at the very foundational level. And just as we were about to get to the discovery stage of this case, the government realized court is likely to rule our way and require discovery. And that discovery would implicate high-ranking members of the Justice Department, high-ranking members of the Food and Drug Administration, high-ranking members of the Biden administration. And so they're saying, hey, Judge, so they're weaponizing their current control of the government bureaucracy to cover up a crime that they themselves are complicit in. A crime that, let's remember, has led to the deaths and disabilities of tens of thousands, if not millions of people around the world, based on the data and information. So the question is whether the court will exercise its critical gatekeeping role to make sure that the American people continue to be represented in this case of United States versus Pfizer, when its so-called representatives, its bureaucratic apparatchiks, are the ones working against the American people, because they themselves would be implicated if discovery goes forward.
This is a catch and kill that they accuse Trump of the highest pharmaceutical order. We're going to capture this case and we're going to kill it so that nobody investigates our own culpable wrongdoing in either fraudulently participating in this or negligently participating in this.
Of note, no one on the government side would sign under penalty of perjury that this was safe, effective, a vaccine, prevented COVID-19. No one is willing to say under penalty of perjury that Pfizer didn't commit massive fraud. So that tells you what's really going on. This is, hey, Judge, we right now have the tools of government. When we're the ones implicated, cover up for us. And don't exercise your independent gatekeeping role. Don't allow any discovery to occur. Don't allow a full evidentiary hearing to occur. Don't allow any of that to occur, because we have right now the weapons of government, of the government bureaucracy, even though they're doing so directly opposed to the interest of the American people. And that's what a False Claims Act and qui tam claim represents. There's a reason why Congress did not give exclusive power to the U.S. government for prosecuting False Claims Act. They gave it to ordinary people. Why? Because there would be times when the only people that would adequately and competently and effectively represent the American people would be an individual. Like, as in this case, Brooke Jackson represents the American people. The Biden administration is in collusion with a corrupt company that, remember, is the most criminally fined corporate drug company in the world, makes drug dealers look like makes the biggest drug cartels look like street corner dealers by comparison. That's who and what Pfizer is. And now that there's really no doubt that Pfizer is guilty, the Biden administration is begging a court, please cover it up. We got an election coming up.
Robert, I'm just going to fact check you in real time. We will not let disinformation go unnoticed on this channel. They are the second most fined. Sorry. This is funny because it's not much of a difference.
I
They're
think
the
by
second
inflation-adjusted dollars, they're still number one.
I was being absolutely glib, tongue-in-cheek. Pfizer, number 2, 2.3 billion. GlaxoSmithKline, 3 billion. They're a criminal organization of the highest order, and they're not even under the guidance of a doctor. Albert Bourla is a freaking veterinarian, if that.
Yeah, exactly. This is the biggest health scandal maybe in world history.
Absolutely ever.
And they're saying, hey, judge, this implicates high-ranking members of our administration. Please let it go away. Please just hush it all up for us, if you don't mind. And this is going to be another case where the judiciary itself is tested. Does the judiciary have the courage to stand up to one of the most corrupt, powerful corporations in the world, Pfizer, and to a corrupt Biden administration? And again, we're not asking that the judge rule in our favor. We're asking just that we be allowed to do the discovery and prosecute the case on behalf of the American people, because the only honorable and honest person who can vindicate the American people's cause in this case for the United States of America is Brooke Jackson. It's not the Biden Justice Department.
Robert, someone in the chat said, but Viva, he said of all time. And so I just pulled up the largest settlements. I can't, you might actually still be right in all of this. They had the second largest settlement ever. They might be the largest fine aggregate. I'll have to add it up, but I was being tongue-in-cheek anyhow, just to illustrate the company that we are.
The hearing will be the afternoon of May the 1st in Beaumont, Texas.
Is it open to the public?
Yeah, yep, it is. And now it's federal court, so nothing's broadcast. So you'd have to get into the courtroom to hear the argument.
Beaumont, Texas, Robert. Shall we share an Airbnb again?
There's a very nice Airbnb near Beaumont, because I've had to be there a couple of times for this. So we'll see. It's another test of our federal judicial branch when they need to exercise a critical gatekeeping role. But it means standing up to powerful government actors. Will they be able to do so? Because unfortunately, the answer has been inconsistent in our recent past.
Robert, I think I just talked myself into flying into Beaumont for this, so we might be hanging. We'll see if we hang on May 1st. May the 1st be with us. Okay, what do we go to now?
We got a bunch of other cases at SCOTUS, but if we want to talk about crazy, corrupt policies, we could talk about the Biden administration new interpretation of gender under Title IX.
So I read it, and I don't understand what I'm reading. They're trying to interpret Title IX, which was to create basically a safe space for women, biological women. Is it XX or XY? It's XX. Title IX was
sex, biological sex. That's what the law says it's supposed to be about protecting.
It was to protect women so they didn't have to compete against men, period. So they had women's spaces, it said.
And women's sports.
They're throwing in gender identity. I just noticed it left, right, and center into that directive, whatever the hell that is. What did you send me? What was that?
It's like 15,000 pages. Welcome to the federal government's new regulations. But buried in there they're doing two things. They are redefining Title IX to require anybody who receives those funds. That's every educational institution in the country. And by the way, they interpret the rules to apply to people who aren't even enrolled students. Right. So this is weaponizing, using federal funds to control public educational institutions, not only towards students, but towards anybody they interact with in the public. And what they're requiring is they must adopt the woke language and woke ideas by treating sexual orientation and gender identity as the same as the word sex. No discrimination based on sex now means no discrimination based on your sexual habits, based on your gender identity, which will basically force all educational institutions in the country to treat men as women if they say they are, and treat certain. I mean, sexual orientation can go broad. We know where they already interpret it these days, as Joe Rogan is pointing out, goes beyond gay. That they're interpreting it a whole lot of other ways. And it's just insanity, and basically forcing this on the entire country using federal control of educational funds to do so. And you will then be subject to Title IX prosecution if you don't endorse the woke agenda, if you don't make your bathrooms and locker rooms available to men, as long as they describe themselves as women, if you don't allow your teams or your sports to, if you don't refer to them as ma'am, what Jordan Peterson warned about 10 years ago is now going to be required of every school in the country.
Lock me up, Robert. I think that'll be my line in the sand at a broader scale. Holy hell. But this is all in direct violation of women's rights, what Title IX was intended to protect in the first place.
Exactly. So it inverts it on its head. I mean, the law says sex, period. It doesn't say sexual orientation. It doesn't say sexual preference. It doesn't say sexual identity. It says biological sex, period. End of story. So they are now going to basically destroy women's sports in the name of wokeism. I mean, the great defenders of feminism are destroying feminism and some of its broadest and biggest achievements. And so it's an embarrassment. We'll see what litigation it may result in. I'm sure there'll be some people that push back and try to find ways to. But as of August, they're like, hey, we know this is complicated, so we'll give you some time to absorb our 15,000 pages. We'll give you a few months. That's all they do. The next school year is when all this nonsense has to be enforced.
Holy hell, Robert. Okay, hold on. Let me bring this up. I was if you noticed me looking to the side, the dogs needed to get the heck out of this room. They were making some noise. Alex Davy Dukes says, great to see you both on Robert's 50th. The Pfizer case is the single most important FCA in U.S. history. I totally agree. So regulators can pen only ensure. So again, a regulator pen can only ensure a monopoly. It can't and never has been able to prevent one. Okay, we got iHall 86. They just want to prove that can make better women. I mean, look at the last couple of years of wars. It's ridiculous. We got Memory Hole says, I'm a veterinarian in Ontario. Pregnancy checks are a major part of dairy practice. Here, the men would have been fined, but not jailed. Can't speak to Pennsylvania. T190, 1990. I can't read all those, but I'm gonna read them when Barnes is talking. So that's the Brooke. Hold on, what were you on there? Oh no, that was the Title IX. It is going to get implemented as of August for the next 2024 year. Anybody who wants to litigate, you have 6 months to read, process, digest, litigate, and hope that it gets heard and adjudicated before it gets implemented.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a disaster. Is what it is. It's a complete disaster on the school on schools across the country.
What it's going to take
in our broader culture.
Yeah, well, what it's going to take is girls and women to just stop competing. Period. It'll hurt for a year or two. Stop competing against men or boys. Period. Let them compete alone. Let them. There was a video of a shot put team not shooting the stone to protest. That's it. It'll be what it'll have to be, a year or two, maybe 3 of suffering for women's sports, girls' sports. That's it. I sure as hell will be vocal. My kids are not, they're competitive. But if I see a boy competing in gymnastics that's for girls, I will be the a-hole that makes a scene. Not a scene, but rather protests. Robert?
It's the insanity of it. And then, I mean, there was a good decision this week by the Supreme Court in Title VII that they continue to expand and enforce that, which is good to see. That if you're transferred, that you don't have to show a substantial harm, like some courts were saying. So sometimes the way they would discriminate against you is they would transfer you, and as long as they didn't change your economic wages, they were allowed to get away with discriminating against you by transferring you. But transferring often is exactly the one thing people don't want to have happen to them employment-wise, and that's discrimination because it changes the terms and conditions of employment. And the Supreme Court correctly came in and said, yes, it does, and you don't have to show any other substantial harm. That was good, and there was a takings case in Texas that got some confusion.
That's the one that we talked about multiple times where they were charging some sort of fee, excessive fee, if there was a redirection of water as they were building a highway or something along those lines.
Yeah, and what it was is people wanted to sue Texas under both state and a federal constitutional law claim. Texas said you can bring your takings claim, but you can only bring it under the state law. The Supreme Court originally took the case planning on ruling whether or not you have a direct cause of action. How do you sue on takings law if there's no specific remedy provided for you? They ultimately didn't decide that because they said actually the Texas state law provides an adequate way of meeting your constitutional objection, provides an effective private cause of action for it. And so it basically skipped the big issue. What happens if there isn't such an option available? How can you sue? They left that for another day by saying the Texas state law claim suffices. So there was a lot of confusion about that case because of what was anticipated versus what came out of it.
Okay.
And both sides declared themselves winners, which just compounded the confusion. But speaking of the Supreme Court, we have a case that we filed a petition for cert on. I'll publish it at vivabarneslaw.locals.com and at 1776lawcenter.com. The Children's Health Defense is bringing a petition to the Supreme Court of the United States saying if we can't sue the FDA for them lying about the COVID vaccine for kids and trying to force it on kids, then that means the FDA is above the law. And so under the traditional definition of case or controversy, under the common interpretation of the ordinary person of that language in the Constitution, this clearly is a case or controversy involving one where the United States is a party. And that's what the judicial power has been vested to handle and resolve. And they skipped it by saying, well, we're really saying nobody can sue the FDA except the drug companies because that's the only people who are impacted. They're saying risk of future harm doesn't count. Children's Health Defense substantial expenses doesn't count. And we're challenging that because there's contradictions of that in prior court decisions.
So we've talked about it in the past, and I'll just steel man the opposition because Children's Health Defense has a specific objective, and they sued the FDA for this jibby jab. They said it's neither safe nor effective, hurts children. They were denied.
The FDA is lying to vulnerable populations, including caregivers and custodians of foster children, people in juvenile facilities, and the like, who are relying upon the FDA's representations for whether this is safe and necessary. And they use Sesame Street. They used a bunch of mechanisms to lie about this, just like they got caught lying about ivermectin. And so Justice Alito recently asked in another case, he goes, it can't be the case that no one can sue the FDA. Is that really the government's position? Yes, it is. And this case presents that on all fours for the Supreme Court. Make clear that the FDA is not above the law, and there needs to be accountability concerning this COVID vaccine being made, put in a position where kids are effectively forced to take it against their own best interest.
Robert, let me bring this up because people might have forgotten, or I don't want to shut this down. Oh gosh, darn it. They might have forgotten, or they might never have known. Let me bring this screen up in the backdrop. Clay Travis, here they go. I thought it was a joke when I first saw it.
Daddy has super duper bandages just like Elmo.
You were super duper today, getting your
Joke.
COVID vaccine,
It's real.
Elmo.
It's real.
Yeah, there was a little pinch, but it was okay. Elmo was really glad to have Daddy and baby David there with him. Baby David, where are you?
I'll stop it there because I actually want to puke. This was an actual Sesame Street shtick bit. And so Children's Health Defense, I mean, it sues the FDA,
because
and
they're
they're
in the
denied.
information business. They're providing access to information for parents and caregivers and custodians about children's health. And they're having to fight the FDA because the FDA is the one lying about this
Okay,
and
so
saying, no, this isn't safe. This isn't effective. You didn't even test it for in the ways you're implying you did. That in fact, we now know it's dangerous. It doesn't prevent. It never met risk, safety, benefit for little kids. But they're putting this on 6-month-olds, and it shouldn't have happened. And we were not allowed any trial on the merits because they're like, nobody can sue the FDA when the FDA lies.
so
The most
actually
vulnerable population in the world.
that clarifies it. It's not the excessive burden that the Children's Health Defense has incurred to litigate.
Well, it's that too. Not to litigate. It's to counter the lies in the court of public opinion.
Okay, and so they were initially denied standing, and that's what they're taking up with their writ to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
When do you know if the Supreme Court accepts that writ?
Probably not until next year, probably.
Oh, so this will be 2025.
Yeah, or late, fall 2024. They might decide sometime by June or July whether to take it, but probably not. Probably not until next year.
I'm going to share that link with everybody. Hold on one second. Okay, it's wild. So that's one good thing. The Supreme Court. What else is there currently pending before the Supreme Court?
The other big Supreme Court case pending this week is a case that we've discussed in the past. That is the rights of the homeless.
Okay, hold on. Before we get there, I went to a thrift shop today. I can never be allowed back into a thrift shop. Look what I got. What does it say?
It says,
if you met my family,
you'd understand.
You would understand. Get out of here. That's what I'm going to say. I went through it. Can you bring in the watch? Bring the watch. But I went to a thrift shop, Robert. I may have gotten into thrifting now. Sorry. So what did you just say? What were you saying?
Oh, so the big case they're going to decide Supreme Court this week that has broader consequences than the policy debate that's in front of them, but it's a real hot policy debate. I think there are like 50 amicus briefs filed in the case. And this is about the rights of the homeless. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm an idiot. That's the one challenging an ordinance that says you can't, station yourself in public property overnight or for whatever,
You can't have a blanket, etc.
Can't have a blanket. And
basically
then,
made it a crime to be homeless.
And so then there were 2 homeless petitioners who say this criminalizes the fact that we are involuntarily homeless.
Because it was undisputed there was no available shelter for them.
And I mean, so I'm amenable to the idea of the legislation. I'm also very sensitive to the challenge. What happens with this? Was this at the this is at the writ for certiorari, or have they taken?
No, they're actually argument on the merits is I think tomorrow or maybe Tuesday.
Okay.
And you have the policy debate about everything going on with homelessness issue, but you have broader constitutional implications. What the city is trying to say is that the 8th Amendment's prohibition on excessive fines and cruel and unusual punishments never applies to cities and states in almost all instances. So they're using the homeless public policy debate to try to have a massive power grab to be able to deny people to criminalize whatever they want, whenever they want. Because and they're saying due process doesn't apply either. So the one argument is that the 5th Amendment due process clause is more applicable than the 8th Amendment's cruel and unusual punishment clause. I don't agree. The cruel and unusual punishment is not limited to methods of punishment. It's always been the proportionality of punishment for the alleged crime, right? So, for example, cruel and unusual punishment can be the death penalty if it's considered a disproportionate to the crime alleged. If we started doing the death penalty for jaywalking, that would be a cruel and unusual punishment. That's not about, but we could also at the same time say the death penalty for murder, the death penalty for rape, the death penalty for other things, it is not disproportionate.
Except unless you did it by way of ripping one finger off at a time, then it would be cruel and unusual punishment, even for where.
Right. The method of there. Exactly. See, they want to radically limit the 8th Amendment to be only about the method of the death penalty, not whether the death penalty could be appropriate for a particular crime. And that's deeply problematic. And there's some conservatives who are aligned on that side of the aisle, very dangerously. A lot of the conservative, what was fascinating is I was curious in all the amicus briefs, would anybody stand up for the constitutional liberties here, including a lot of so-called constitutional liberty think tanks and foundations? every single one of them is opposing constitutional liberty in this case. National Criminal Justice Foundation. They're not for actual criminal defendants, but more importantly, they're not for constitutional liberties either. Pacific Justice Foundation. Some other big ones that are known on the libertarian side are coming in anti-libertarian because of the economic interests that get implicated by homelessness, real estate, value, a lot of other issues. And so they're so caught up in the homelessness debate that they're ignoring the constitutional doctrine they're now espousing, which is to utterly gut the 8th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution so that cruel and unusual punishment no longer means cruel and unusual punishment outside of methods of punishment rather than proportionality of punishment to the underlying crime. It's been called the conduct requirement as well as the intent requirement. Historically, punishing somebody for something that is involuntary, that is not within their control, has, since our founding generation, been considered a cruel and unusual punishment. They want to get rid of that too. They want there to be no substantive limitation from the 8th Amendment and only be a 5th Amendment due process limitation. And the problem there is that law has been very inconsistent and chaotic. And you have a lot of conservatives that don't like substantive due process, so they don't even want it to exist. So if they were to take away the 8th Amendment's protection, they're greenlighting the state getting to call you a criminal, even if for just your status, for nothing that is within your control.
Well, there's a certain arbitrariness also to saying like you could be on the bench at 4 p.m, but not at 4 a.m. type thing. But okay, and so the arguments are going to be this week.
Yep.
What's the?
So yeah, this case has big. Decide for homeless. The complaint. What's fascinating is all the homeless advocates want the Supreme Court to reverse the Ninth Circuit and say the 8th Amendment doesn't apply. Why? Because it shows you how your social worker bureaucrats work. They're complaining that they no longer get to control the homeless anymore. And I was like, I thought you were here to help the homeless, right? Isn't that what the shelter's for and all that? You're there to help them. No, you're there to control them because they're like, oh, now that they can't be arrested for sleeping on a park bench, they don't come and submit themselves to our authority.
Yeah.
So you have like LA Human Rights Organization, Homeless Organization, Mission Center, Hey, please reinstate the old law, Judge, because that gave us social workers the power, which is what they really care about. They don't care about the homeless. They care about having power over people, for which homelessness is their pretext for it. So but there was a couple of independent law professors and one independent organization that spoke out for the homeless and pointed out the basic problems, constitutional problems, with doing anything other than affirming the Ninth Circuit. That now what they may do is they may say, yes, the 8th Amendment applies. Yes, the 8th Amendment prohibits involuntary punishment. Yes, the 8th Amendment applies to proportionality. It requires a conduct and intent requirement under the law. But the court should have done an individualized analysis. This is what the Biden administration is pitching, rather than a class-based analysis. What that would do is effectively make it brutally hard to bring the suits, and thereby let the governments go back to doing their illegal behavior and just gambling the 1 or 2 times they get caught with the person who is homeless, but somehow has access to a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a big case because the conservatives are so caught up and we want homeless people off the streets and quit harassing us and creating all these problems that they're willing to sacrifice constitutional liberties to get there. And that's a mistake.
We'll do the January 6th oral arguments. I can't believe it was only last week. I thought it was like 3 weeks ago by now. And then we'll head over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, January 6th, Robert. So I listened to it.
What did your takeaway? Because I saw conflicting. Some people thought, oh, they're definitely going to overturn. Other people thought, oh, no, they're definitely going to affirm. I saw completely conflicting interpretations of people who heard the same argument.
I'm not going to judge anybody who disagrees because I listened to Tim Cast's interpretation and analysis afterwards. I thought I started off thinking, of course they're going to overturn it and say this is not what it was intended to govern. But then I heard some of the questions, and the only one who asked the good questions was Alito, right? It was Alito, and Clarence Thomas. Amy Coney Barrett, no. They were entertaining the idea that it wasn't so absurd. It wasn't an absurd interpretation that sections C1 and C2 have to be read independently. And if C2 is independent and not in the same paragraph, what does it refer to then other than everything else that's not covered in C1? So I don't, I
Which
was
is an absurd way of interpreting.
no, but
criminal
I'm telling you, like, maybe I'm overly cynical, or maybe I know that I predict badly, so I'm predicting badly, hoping that I'm wrong again. But I don't think they're gonna. I think it's gonna be a bad ruling. That's what I think personally.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I've been wrong, and maybe I'll be wrong again, and maybe that's why I hope.
I think they have to say it doesn't apply just due to the history of the obstruction jurisprudence, so that the Supreme Court has almost always invalidated trying to extend obstruction laws. That historically they don't like it, and that long line of precedents is such that even if you have issues with Barrett, it also, by the way, it's a place where there may be division within the left. So you may see Jackson join Alito.
Well, but then even Jackson, where she asked the question, I forget what it was, but basically like, well, what about, would this apply to peaceful protests? Like, well, no, it requires corrupt intent. It's like, oh,
But
well,
they admit it applied to peaceful protest.
that's
Yes,
good. That's,
peaceful protest could be could subject you to criminal prosecution. The fact she even asked that told me that, I mean, your old criminal defense oriented jurists don't like these laws in general. So, well, I'm sure politically she, has no problem with January 6 people being locked up. I think the way this obstruction statute is interpreted is something that has traditionally judges with her background don't like extending. And then I think the other thing is that not only the historical precedent of where the Supreme Court tends to rule on these cases, but the better argument. In terms of, like, I think that's why Turley came away saying they're going to throw it out. Because it's who had the better policy arguments, who had the better precedent arguments. And that was more from Alito, that, Barrett was trying to come up with excuses and was trying to find ways out. And some of the others were trying to find ways out, but they weren't persuasive at all. They weren't rooted in precedent. They weren't sound policy. And when you're up there and you admit mere peaceful protest can be the grounds to send you to prison for 20 years,
Robert,
if we don't like your intent,
corrupt
then
intent,
you're telling the Supreme Court they have to step in.
I hope you're right, but I swear to you, I didn't get that feeling. And where they said, well, it has to be corrupt intent and it has to be more than an incidental, more than a insignificant interference. Where
But that's
I appreciate
every level of that's
a
every
protest. No, but that's the logical argument. But like when Alito,
remember Gorsuch's comparisons, right? Gorsuch was saying, would this be one? Would this be one?
Was
and he was
Gorsuch
listing a bunch of liberal Democratic
Yeah,
activities.
well,
that
who said
the
it?
last 3 years?
Jamal Bowman pulling the fire alarm. Was that Gorsuch or was that Alito?
That was Gorsuch.
So I mean, he had the
Gorsuch
best
was like
questions.
bam, bam, bam,
Yeah.
bam. So the problem is if you have the intellectual heavyweights, Gorsuch, Alito, on this kind of issue, clearly are going to say it's invalid. They got precedent and good public rhetorical policy behind them. I don't see Barrett trying to lead an effort against them. That's the way I'd put it. She might not like to rule in their favor, but she's the kind of weak intellectual. She's not very smart. That she in an area outside her area of expertise, I don't see her trying to fight them on this. If she had a liberal in her pocket that gave good arguments, good policy, good precedent, but she's not going to, because even Jackson is going to be conflicted on this.
It's
and more likely to vote with Gorsuch than she is with Kagan.
Let me bring it up because it's
Also, Sotomayor was even bothered by this, by some of the questions. I mean, that's
Oh.
the problem is they need Breyer. Like, Breyer's an old neoliberal authoritarian of the left. Kagan does that a little bit, but not nearly the same degree as Breyer. They don't have anybody wanting to fight for these January 6 cases on the court.
Where they said, whoever, this is what the statute says, alters, destroys, mutilates, conceals a record, document, or other yada, yada, yada.
And what's that first word?
Alters?
Otherwise.
Oh, no. But then they get into otherwise.
How does otherwise not reference the first part of the statute?
Well, but at one point, one of them asked, basically saying, like, if it's a separate provision, so clearly is intended to be distinct, otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes. Well, what is that? If that only applied to documents, they would have put it in the same provision.
No, I mean, that doesn't make sense. I mean, the way these laws are written, that's just the coding deciding to separate them out. That the laws are often written combined, where all those words are combined.
I hope I'm wrong.
But
I
here's the
don't
other
know.
issue: the rule of lenity, right? In other words, if there's any doubt about the interpretation of the law, they have to rule in favor of the defendant. So clearly, there's going to be doubt. If you have justices who don't agree, then how do you say someone who's on fair notice that this could apply? Also, the other thing is the long history here, that the government has pretty much never won on trying to expand the obstruction statutes. They've lost about a dozen times, even in cases where people thought, no way Supreme Court's going to overturn. They did. Enron. I mean, like, no way they'll do that. Well, yep. I mean, so, in cases impacted by Enron. So that's why I think that I didn't hear anything. I only heard parts of the argument, but I didn't hear if the pro January 6th side had a good argument, it would have been repeated over and over again in the legal press. The fact that I didn't hear any told me they didn't have a persuasive one. So that what people were unsettled by was that everybody wasn't on board with overthrowing this right away.
Mhm.
But that reflects the current court. The only courts that are really committed, Jackson is conflicted because she doesn't like these kind of criminal laws, but she likes January 6th people being prosecuted. You have Gorsuch and Alito, who are clear where they're coming from, and likely Thomas is on that side. But Roberts doesn't care about criminal defendants' rights. Barrett doesn't care about criminal defendants' rights. They're statists. They're institutionalists. Though I thought Kavanaugh asked something that sounded skeptical of the statute as well.
Oh, no. Robert just started freezing again. Oh, no, you froze. Okay, sorry. You thought Kavanaugh?
I thought Kavanaugh said something skeptical of the J6 cases.
I have to refresh my memory. All that I'm going to say is I'm going to reaffirm my prediction and hope that I get to be made fun of for being wrong. I'm not optimistic of the ruling. So I'm just going to say that. Robert, before we head over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com, I want to share the other thing that I got at this thrift shop. Okay, look, I think I've discovered something amazing. This was $80. It's a working pocket watch called Elgin National Watch Company. And check this out in the back. Like, I think this is I may have just look at that. It works. And I love this. I'm going to look this up. I looked it up and they're not worth $10,000, but I might have made a $20 net profit off this if I sell it, which I'm not. I'm going to use it as a pocket watch. So I don't think I can go thrifting ever again because I buy crap that I'm not crap. I just buy stuff. I love this. Elgin National Watch Company. Apparently it's made in 1886 based on the serial number. So phenomenal. We're going to take this party over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. For those who are not coming, Robert, what does your schedule hold for this upcoming week?
Oh, busy. So I hope we will do some stuff, but one case is actually scheduled for trial on Tuesday. It should get continued, but it might, you never 100% know. So I might have to travel and whatnot. So we'll see how all that unfolds.
Okay, excellent. Actually, let me just do one thing, and we're going to get to the tip questions in locals in a second. It was here, this, bada bing, bada boom. Robert, how do you think the Supreme Court will rule on January 6th? Okay, we got that. Hail to you, gents, for raising alarms, and hail to Jordan B. Peterson for putting his career and personal life in jeopardy, for being early, not the first, and effective in exposing authoritarian madness. And then we got to the rest. Great to see both. Okay, so we got that. Now what we're going to do is this. We're going over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com for the after party. It's going to be phenomenal. If you're not coming, enjoy the rest of the evening. If you are coming, locals right here. Before you leave, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you hit the thumbs up. Let me refresh here. We got 1,870 thumbs up, but we're at 21,000 people watching. So just hit the thing before you go and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, come over to the locals. One last time, and then I'm going to end this on Rumble, and I'll be live maybe not tomorrow, we'll see, but definitely this week with some good guests, so stay tuned. Ending on Rumble, party on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Robert, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. People in locals are already telling me it's a good watch, get it lubed, but it's not going to make you you're not going to be able to retire. Although if I retired, I might just go thrifting all the time, so we'll see how that works. Okay, tipped questions. I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top. $5 and more. Although I'm reading Abrams because it's the first one. It says Prime Minister Blackface is just going to reclassification tenses houses. Yeah, reclassify houses. Okay, load more. Is it loading more? Okay, well done, Viva, says Hampton R. Desgal. $5. Viva, please stop ignoring locals for last. We are your first fans. Mandalici, Mentally, did you do anything but complain? Like, I don't want to be mean, but like, I save the exclusive part for afterwards, and it's not a question of last. It's a question. This is a question of first. This is the after party. Okay, it's like I'm and mentally, I'm getting irritated because like there's never enough I can do. Okay, I'm done. Sorry, my apologies. $5 from why did Trump sign that check with a Sharpie? That check is suspicious, says Denise N2. That's his signature. I think he uses a fat tip pen. Mandalici says, Robert, thank you and your crew for the bomb beignets from the 50th BD event. Almost like I was there. Picture priceless. LOL, Mandalici. Then we got scrolling down. $20 from XGS Wood. Thank you for both you and Bars. Well, that's easy enough to read. $10 we got S. Spiffster. I thought a condition of a TRO, temporary restraining order, is that the applicant cannot be made. The applicant cannot be made at a later date. Since Joe Neerman is a member of the press, what is it about being a member of the press that they cannot be made whole later? To hear the speech in real time.
Yeah.
Robert, what?
Yeah, well, and it's the right. Like, for example, his audience, he has a broader, bigger, more access, more import, more impact if he's able to talk about what Trump has said about the case. So that's why the press has always had an independent right, as well as the audience writ large, to hear what someone has to say. That First Amendment's not just a right to speak; it's a right to hear.
But it's the most time sensitive of rights because you it can't be made.
And what it is the reason why I'd encourage that methodology, going the press route, is because they've gone out of their way to help the New York Times in those New York courts. So you get to quote those New York Times cases. And does the court just want to say, oh, no, we just pimp ourselves out for the New York Times. We don't actually care about freedom of press.
Mandalici says there is a jury selection software being used that makes the jury selection bias. Very interesting. We got Truman HW says, WHO, if Trump doesn't qualifies for a change of venue. Sorry, that's not WHO. That's WHO. WHO, if Trump doesn't qualifies for a change of venue. Robert.
Oh, exactly. All this has been ridiculous.
Beavis Wallace, $20 says, howdy from McAllen, Texas. Ooh, McAllen. I just thought of Scotch. Our friends at America's Untold Stories advice to Trump is to leave and never return to New York. By participating in the trials, he is legitimizing the charges. Do you agree? Robert, I'll hear you in a second. I disagree. This is the best publicizing, the best campaigning he can possibly get. You default and you abscond. They will issue whatever they want in your absence. Les absents ont toujours tort. This is good publicity, and this is not participating in the injustice. It's putting it on blast. Robert, what do you say?
Yeah, I don't see he has really practically any other choice.
Time for, this is from Ricardo Pelota, says, time for FARC tactics in the U.S. Robert, what is FARC tactics?
That's a revolutionary group.
Okay, well, shit, now I'm canceled. Okay, sorry, I thought we were trying to swear, like just FARC off. Okay. Ricardo Pelota, if I get canceled, I blame you. We got going down. Bender is great. Viva, I forgot to ask you at the Vegas party. Did you get Garrett Ziegler in touch with Vinny? Please get Garrett Ziegler on the Unusual Suspects. Dude, he would love it. They would love it. And I'll ask Vinny. Now, Vinny and I are best friends now. It's done. Like he's I'm gonna destroy that dog.
Yeah, the dog agrees with you.
Yeah, the dog wants to get. I don't even know. You want to get in? I'm gonna. We got Cincinnatus 68 says prothonotary is pronounced with the accent on thon. So prothon. I don't even know what the word means.
Prothonotary is how it's spelled. I have no idea how it's pronounced.
I'm going to go with proton or tary. We got back here $5. Jeanette Victoria. Look at these dogs. Since I believe many countries in the West have become judicial tyrannies. What country would Robert ship us to? Let's say send us to. I understand a lot of people are moving to Russia, but that seems to be a haven for young families. What about other alternatives? Puppers for attention.
That depends on the individual and the circumstances. So
people tell me,
but right now El Salvador sure is mighty interesting. They'll give you all kinds of. Not only you got Bitcoin, they locked up the criminals without stripping everybody of their constitutional liberties. They're giving. I think they're giving people money to come there, like free visa, passport, access, citizenship. Apparently, for a limited subset of people, if you had a certain skill set. So he's doing some real interesting things there in El Salvador. Probably the best example of populist governance in the Western Hemisphere.
I couldn't imagine going to El Salvador. That's even further south than Mexico, where people are telling me to go, and it's a good place if if the poo-poo hits the fan, even in America. But okay, let's hope we don't get to that bridge to cross. Holy crap, I almost dropped. The most bestest Viva Barnes Law merch on earth. Viva Fry. Okay. Did Trump's, so Jeanette Victoria has another $5. Says, LOL, I'm a boomer who has been drinking raw milk since the 70s. Truman HW. Did Trump's New York or DC attorneys appeal venue or the biased jury questions? It's an opportunity to have tried going up to SCOTUS for not only Trump, but for the rest of the people persecuted in outrageous venues.
Yeah, I mean, I was for that. I don't think they did that with consistency.
Kenny Diaz, $5 says the EUA was a fraud against the people because it required the demonization of effective treatments in COVID. We're seeing it now.
Exactly right.
What they're
It's
now,
one of the claims that we made the CHD that there was children's health defense against the FDA. This did not qualify for emergency use authorization because there were effective alternatives available,
which they're now demonizing, so undemonizing. Robert, what course do the American people have against all the lawlessness within our government and the courts, as we all see, feel, believe, observe? In the last election was fraught with fraud. How is Biden still not removed because of his non-compos mentis? The POTUS has legal competency requirements. This is Merchant Marine. What is the legal definition of a ghost gun? New York. Oh, geez, we didn't talk about Dexter Taylor. Well, I talked about it earlier this week. What's the New York definition of ghost guns? He's facing 18 years. He was convicted. I spoke with him yesterday. Dude is unbelievably at peace with what's going on. Unbelievably calm, cool, and collected. And says the conditions aren't that bad at Rikers Island. And he's supposed to have a parole meeting to determine whether or not he gets bail pending appeal. Touch wood. We'll hope for that. But I'll get updates as they go along, and I'm going to be hopefully I'll get updates. What is the legal definition? We got the ghost gun. A Merchant Marine. Thank you, gentlemen. Listening to you guys helps me be a better American. P.S. Happy belated birthday, Robert. Can we get a January 6th committee on the same obstruction law they've tried to use on January 6th protesters because they destroyed evidence in the investigation? LOLs, but not going to happen, but should happen. Victor Cardone. Robert, in your opinion, is the SCOTUS session the most important, consequential in our time? This one.
Potentially.
Ryan PD 911. It has been a long black-pilled couple of weeks. You got any of those white pills? We'll get there in a second, maybe.
Hey, the judge stuck with his guns against all that pressure in the Amos Miller case.
That's not a big enough white pill, Robert. I'm sorry. Sammy says, years ago, Ben Shapiro fawned over Nikki Haley, calling her his spirit animal. Anybody using that term, that's suspicious. He also extolled his praise on Amy Coney Barrett. Both have since shown they stayed as uniparty. Ben is kind of off these days, and I wonder if he'll add to these things I was wrong about. Page scrolling up. Ithaca 37 Cato. Has Biden done a survey on how many likely voters will not vote Trump if he's convicted? Oh, sorry, hold on a second. Has Barris, not Biden, done any surveys?
That's a useless poll at this point because you're trying to play out what's likely to occur by asking people to anticipate something without knowing that. So generally speaking, if you say, hey, if so-and-so is a criminal, would you still vote for them? You'll get a good number of people say no. But that's not going to tell you what's actually going to happen when they go through an actual trial like this. And this was the same argument back when he was indicted. Back then they said, if Trump was indicted, would you still vote for him? A bunch of people said no. And then what happened after he was indicted? He went up. Yeah. Because you have to understand, how is this actually likely to play out, not in the abstract. None of these cases are in the abstract. If they had Trump on a real crime, it would do real damage to him. They don't have him on a real crime.
We got Schnookums, $5 says, why is 18 U.S.C. 1500 plus a series of laws not discussed that they reference proceedings of justice and the EC? Vote count
college vote
is not any more than a vote on the budget bill. Abram P says endorse, embrace the sarcasm. GR Star 85, $5 says, I believe the House passing a bill to confiscate Russian Forex will severely undermine international confidence in our banking system. Your thoughts? Yeah, I think we both agreed on that many times in the past. What will happen in 2028 plus with the national popular vote interstate compact and the electoral college?
I don't think enough states will join that.
18 USC, this is Spam Ranger, needs to be interpreted in the recent I have an alarm that seems to be going off. Robert, do you want to field a couple of questions? Field the remaining topics while I go see what's going on in the house.
Yeah.
Give me a second, people.
Let's see where we are. Answered that one. Answered that one. There was a TikTok part in the Ukraine-Israeli aid bill. Know anything about that? I think it's their attempt to ban TikTok, but I'm not sure what the final language was. Can someone with recap access? Oh, that was Judge Cannon's April 16th. I think you mean Pacer access. Denial of the amicus brief. I applied for Pacer, but don't have search and download access. I see. Link attached. Huh. Oh, interesting. Take a look at that. And I think that gets all the tipped questions. The Viva was swatted. Hopefully not. First the CIA got Barnes's computer. Now the FBI is raiding Viva. Exactly. My friend pronounces them Paycheck Phillips to annoy his cousin. Oh, you mean Patek Philippe? Client once gave me a Patek Philippe as a thank you for a big win. Then I found out how much that thing was worth. I was like, people are going to chop my arm off for that thing. So I never wore that after that. I was like, no way. But they are beautiful watches. But I've never been like a big watch snob. I don't usually have a watch, actually. Haven't for years. My dad loved calculator watches. He couldn't get enough of that. He's like, look at this. I can do tiny little buttons. The Viva's kids burnt the popcorn? Probably so. Durst said no prison for Trump. Do you agree? Yeah. This whole thing isn't about locking him up. This whole thing is about destroying him in the court of public opinion. And that's their goal. I mean, there's no basis. Well, I mean, there is on the federal cases, but there shouldn't be any basis for any of these criminal charges. But even if there were convictions, sentences would be ridiculous. I'm not a complainer. I speak what others think. Okay, Mandolici. What does the CIA have in the skiff? It apparently turns all that enters into their servant. But remember, Trump went in there. He was unaffected. So I think it's mindset that converts these people. I know some people are thinking they get blackmailed. I think it's just old school pressure. And the problem is when you have a small group of people that are given power, they will abuse that power. And when they get to be part of the club, that's what they really like. Oh, I'm part of the club now. Like, Jake Tapper and those they love their intelligence contacts. They just get so thrilled. Oh, I'm talking to some CIA guy. I'm talking to a high-ranking FBI person. They just love it because it's elite power attracts elite power. And I think that's what it reflects and reveals.
Just so everybody knows, I didn't get taken by the FBI either. Apparently someone overcooked something and some smoke had gathered.
That's what they were guessing. They were guessing the little one was lighting up some popcorn.
No, I'm not. There's no blame. It was just the smoke detector upstairs was triggering. It sounded like the house was under attack. Whew, okay.
Someone asked, still feel confident Trump is going to win? Yes. How long before all the dogs hear the whistle of no justice, no peace? That's a good point.
18. Well, we got 18 USC. We got that one. Robert, in your opinion, SCOTUS session must be okay. So we got all of that.
Talk to Ben Carson about the vaccine. That'd be fun. He would be a cool guy to interview.
If Ben Carson would come on, that would be every day of the week and twice on Sunday. Hold on a second. There's a $50 that I did not see. How long before all the dogs hear the whistle of no justice, no peace? View tipped. Okay, I'm going to go back down here. Ben Carson, you still feel confident about Trump? And what does the CIA have on the skiff? In the skiff, it apparently turns all that enter into their bitch. Did you talk about that one, Robert?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Did we do everything? We have a few more topics.
We covered it. We got it all.
Robert, it was amazing. Sorry for the we had some issues at the beginning and at the end, but everything in between and up until now has been fantastic. People in the chat were saying the watch is good, but this one apparently they only made 1,000 of. But that was
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's relatively rare. Then
we'll see what happens. I'm gonna try to fix it. Someone said lube it up and take it to a watchmaker, which I think I will.
I thought you were gonna go with a Pulp Fiction reference.
No, I don't think so. I'm checking to see if it's silver. It doesn't. It says on the back.
Remember, the watch looked a lot like that. Remember,
it did. 20 years I hid this hunk of junk up my ass. This is called Silver Road. I don't even know what it means. All I know is one day I want to like get something. Oh, I'm gonna send a picture to everyone in locals. I got a massive antique American flag that is now draped inside the house, and it's beautiful. So,
Oh, awesome.
Robert, this has been amazing. Let me make sure that we have not missed anything on Rumbles. I'm going to refresh one more time and then go to the tipped chat and make sure that nothing came in at the end that I have not seen. German silver. I don't know. I didn't see a 925 anywhere on it. What's with all these new shorts on socials showing people in Australia trying to take money out of their banks and being denied or showing they need to show why they need their own money? I haven't seen that, but sounds a lot like the bank run that we had in Canada where they imposed some very restrictive measures on banking, and it caused people to withdraw as much money as they could, and then they had daily limits placed and could not withdraw beyond that. Robert, so you might have to present the motion for or writ of habeas corpus this week for the Pennsylvania man.
Yep, and the that case concerning the woman they're trying to prosecute for recording her own court proceeding is tentatively scheduled for jury trial on Tuesday. I was just hired on Saturday, so presumably the court will move that a couple of months for me to come up to speed on the entire trial. But you never know for absolute sure. So I'm hoping on Monday get confirmation of that because my daughter's in town, supposed to go to dinner with her and her boyfriend Monday night. But I might have to like hop a red eye and be in Philly Tuesday morning if the judge goes kind of AWOL.
May I ask, has she had prior counsel on that? Like,
no,
will it
I think she got to the point where she didn't trust lawyers, period.
So it's not like a judge is going to say this is your third or fourth lawyer. You've asked for 3 or 4. Okay, good.
No.
So at least
in fact, the case is only about 9 months old.
Okay.
So in criminal case terms, that's pretty new of a case.
When is the event in Florida that we're attending together?
Oh, at the end of May.
Okay, good. Not May 10th, correct?
Correct. No, it's like May 30th, 31st.
Good.
Like that.
Apparently, I might have.
Yeah, May 1st is Beaumont, the Bo Jackson hearing.
Okay, amazing. And May 10th, I might be in Toronto for a free speech event, which we'll see to protest that rubbish that's going on in Canada. Robert, this has been amazing. And we've done it again. What we're going to do, everybody, locals, thank you for being here. Robert and I are going to say our proper goodbyes afterwards. I will refresh. You missed my super anger USC 18 due to alarm. You missed my super ranger. Okay, that's from Patty F. Walter. The alarm. Can a Nearman win be used to force open all courts?
Yeah, it's a precedent that benefits everybody everywhere.
Okay, and now we're ending it so that I don't have to go refresh and say I missed another one. Locals, thank you all for being here. Bourbon with Barnes, if we're lucky, we're going to have them this week.
Yeah, hopefully it'll just depend on whether I have to travel or not.
Okay, and I will try to pay special attention this week, and it's going to be a good week. So stay tuned, everyone. Good night. Enjoy the week.